Hey guys, Darren Carr here, coach of Wise Ocean Pods, and welcome back to another episode of the Club Preview Series. On today's episode, we are talking about the Geelong Cats, who are looking like they may be pretty relevant in 2025 with some big name players and potentially the highest owned player currently, as we all know. But before we quickly get into today's video, I just wanted to quickly apologize for the videos that haven't been coming out quite regularly at the moment. Just during the Christmas and New Year period, I just didn't really get a whole lot of time away from the family, being interstate for that period, so didn't really have the time to be doing videos. So I do apologize, but I'm now back at home, and hopefully I will be putting out plenty of content for you guys over the month of January and smashing out the rest of these club preview series. So without further being ado, let's get into today's episode.
All the pain.
So the Geelong Cats had a pretty good 2024 where they finished third overall in the home and away season. Went on to the I think it was a qualifying, I believe, and they unfortunately got beaten by Brisbane there, who obviously went on to be the premiers. So overall had a very good 2024, which a lot of us probably, particularly me being a Hawthorn supporter, are the arch rivals of Geelong, so I'm not super happy about it, but praying for the downfall, but unfortunately, I don't think that's going to be happening in 2025. They've are very good at being very consistent in terms of picking up very good talent and continuing to push up the ladder. So where do I expect them to finish in 2025? They probably still finish in the top four for me. I think they've picked up some quality talent. As we know, Bailey Smith slots in and probably provides plenty for them. And I think they just also found a lot of youngsters that slot into their side very well and just are able to contribute to them, allow them to continue to be very strong in the future. But in terms of fantasy, what are we looking for when it comes to Geelong? So firstly, looking at the opening round, they do have the opening round. So they come up against the Brisbane Lions, so we will get a bit of a first chance to look at what things change. So we will get a look at, the likes of Bailey Smith. Where does he slot in? What sort of split does he have when it comes to a CBA role? Does he get CBAs? Does he not? We all sort of expect him to, but you're never 100% sure what I think it's Chris Scott is going to do. So we'll have to wait and see on that one. They do have the round 4 bye, as a lot of people know, which is the hardest early bye so far, obviously with the 4 teams on that one. So that is one thing to keep note of when you're picking guys like this. So we already know we've got one already locked in. How many more can we select from that sort of range? Maybe one or two more, I would say, but that's really team dependent. They also have round 16 bye in the mid-season, so that's the furthest one away. So you have a bit of a break in between them, so that can definitely work in our favour. But in terms of trade-ins, who do they really bring in? Obviously, I've alluded to Bailey Smith already, obviously being traded from the Western Bulldogs. He is slotted on the wing. According to the AFL, I'm not 100% sure how accurate that be. I think he'll have at least some sort of split in the midfield, whether that's a 50-50 role or it's a solid 70%. I would like to think. I'm hopeful, anyways. But just the way the Cats sort of line up each and every year, there's been never super consistent players that stay in that midfield for a big period of time. So I am a little bit hesitant when it comes to saying that he's going to be a predominant CBA taker, but fingers crossed that he can do the job for us. Besides that, the only other trade-in to mention really, which wasn't really a trade-in, it was Jack Martin, who was a delisted free agent, so they just picked him up. And I'll speak about him a little bit later, but he's definitely one I'm on the watch list as well, because as we all know, the Geelong Cats are very good at picking up these sort of rejects from other clubs and making them absolute weapons for them. So definitely someone who has been fantasy relevant for us in the past. So big watch on him. He is super cheap at the moment after not playing too many games. So we'll get into him a bit later. Besides that, the outs for the Cats, really, there's not a huge amount of names in terms of fantasy relevance, but you got Tom Hawkins obviously retired for the forward line. That opens up the door for Shannon Neal to really slot back in there, being that second tall or even first tall, because I think he is taller than Cameron, actually. but I don't think he's super fantasy relevant. I think he's played enough games last season to really be priced out what he's going to do. The other one is Zach Tui, who was in the back line. He didn't play a lot of games, last year, so it's not probably going to be as significant as what it could have been if he played all of the games, but it definitely frees up a spot for the likes of, a Humphreys, who was sort of on that fringe last year. Obviously, does that improve, a Tom Stewart's distribution, a Zach Guthrie, for example? There's also a lot of guys aware that could just free up a few more points. Besides the retirees, you got Brandon Parfitt and Gary Rowan, who were delisted with a bunch of other names that weren't super, AFL relevant. I personally hadn't heard of many of them, so definitely weren't fantasy relevant in my eyes. In terms of the draft, Geelong's didn't head to the draft at all. They had the highest pick was pick 44, and they picked up a key forward. So I doubt that's going to be any fantasy relevant for us. So we're really just going to skip over the rookies in today's video. I'll maybe touch on them a little bit later in another video, but not today. Before we get into some players specifically, I really can't fault what they're saying here on the best 22. I like to look at this just because it gives us a bit of a guide on what we sort of expect. Does Patrick Dangerfield still get a predominant CBA role? I would like to see them move past him a little bit more and potentially throw in a Sean Manor. I think that's where he's going to thrive the most. I will talk about him a little bit more in depth a little bit more. But I would love Patrick Dangerfield to be moved on. I think this is potentially his last season. If not, it'll be next season. I think the game's moved past him. Sam De Koning, I think, is obviously the best key forward for them, so I hope he stays back there and doesn't move to this ruck role that they tried last year, and it really sort of, for fantasy, it was great. He scored really well, but in terms of what he can do, I definitely think he's more of a backman. They need to move past Stanley though. I don't really rate him in terms of ruckman. I think there's better options out there. I think they should really move past him, and I personally don't think Max Holmes is a midfielder. I think he's more of the halfback distributor. That's where I'd prefer him to be, and I think Tom Stewart is much better as a midfielder personally. But that probably is a good segue to get into the individual players, and we're going to start at the top. And to start at the top, I can show you right here. Max Holmes was the number one scorer for Geelong Cats in 2024, which is a bit of a surprise because looking at the points that they've scored, the highest that they averaged was 94.3. That's pretty low when it comes to what other teams have scored, where they've had multiple people in the top 100, like over 100 averaging, and even a couple into the 110. So that really shows you, or really alludes that the Cats really aren't super reliant on one individual player being super consistent in terms of getting those fantasy points and racking them all the time. They quite distribute their load quite regularly. So that's probably why they haven't been super relevant in the past for us. I know there's a few people in 2024 that were sort of in our teams here and there. Obviously, a lot of rookies. You're talking about a Sean Matter, a Jack Clark was also there as well. Brian Myers finished in the top six forwards. Tom Stewart was in and out of our side. Some people started with Max Holmes. I'm just not sure if that's going to be the case this year, but we'll talk about these guys anyway, just because they potentially can improve. So Max Holmes is priced at, I'll bring up his player breakdown. Oh, here, I got it up. He is priced out at 94.5, 969k. And like I said, was one of the better picks in 2024, where he obviously was priced at 75, and he switched to this main distributor role off halfback and even spent some time in the midfield. So that's where he really saw that bump in numbers. Took a few kickouts here and there, but wasn't anything significant enough to really justify his jump up in average. It was really just purely based on, his average to kick more. Really not looking for the handball, and obviously being that main distributor, the ball was the players were looking for him a lot more, so he was getting a lot more marks. He obviously increased by over 2 marks in average, so that's where he saw a lot of his points jump up. He is currently the 9th ranked defender coming into 2025, so he is there or thereabouts in terms of the ballpark of what we want to look for in that sort of top 6 defenders line. He The other thing I really like about him is his high floor. So his lowest score of 2024 was 71. So that was in round 21, and while that's really good, he also didn't have much of a ceiling, right? His highest score was 120, so he's not really that massive guy you're gonna get 150 from, which isn't a bad thing, but it's also not a great thing when you're looking for a potential an option that you're looking for to pay out for. I keep saying for. He's not going to provide you that captain option that you really need. So that probably takes it away from me that in terms of picking him. In terms of value, I probably don't see him being too much value. I think he could improve his average by 3 or 4 points here and there and push closer to 100, but probably without being super conservative in terms of what his role is going to be. I don't think he's going to be this midfield heavy role that we sort of saw last year with the inclusions of Bailey Smith coming in. I think that potentially drops out a fair bit. I think we will continue to see Dangerfield in there. Then and Atkins was also one that was highly getting a fair share of the CBAs. And there's a few others that I probably think that probably don't get too much of a game next year, but we'll wait and see. It's just nice that he has defender status and that we can pick him in the defensive line, which is the hardest position at the moment. And I'm really questioning whether I want to start one of these defenders from Geelong, because there are quite a few decent options that I can all see plenty of value in, and all can go to the next level in their game. In terms of the stats readings, in terms of like when he was in the midfield, when he wasn't in the midfield at all, it really didn't make much of a difference. When he averaged over 40% in the CBAs, he averaged 93 over 11 games. So his average was 94. So it really actually didn't benefit him. So I think he's about where he's going to be in terms of his role. So that's probably enough about Max Holmes. We'll move on to someone that I think is a bit more relevant and has been a fantasy gun for us in the past, and that is Tom Stewart. He went absolutely massive for us in the second half of the year in 2024. He is now priced down at 87.6 after a few injury-riddled games in last season. I think he had 2 massive injuries, which saw him have a pretty low score. So if we look at his scores here, that 47 and that 26 really hurt his average. Besides that, he just generally had a pretty poor year. I know that was a pretty big stretch where he just had consistently poor scores. And this is the period where he really went massive for us, consistently over 100. And that's when we saw him sort of jump into this midfield role. Had bulk CBAs. I can show you that here. Where is Tom Stewart? So from round 16 to roughly round 23, that's when he had the most CBAs, and that's when over that duration, he was averaging 107. So if you just go based on that alone, he is 20 points of upside on what he is priced at currently. That is absolutely massive, and that would have him be probably the second or third defender period in the fantasy game. So that's why he is highly on my list in terms of what I want to look out for. I just really want to see what his role is going to be like in the preseason. Luckily we get a look at it in terms of actual game time against the reigning premiers of all people. So they're going to have to try. It's obviously 4 points. So that will be interesting to see. The only concern for me, obviously, his last 2 games he did drop off in terms of CBAs, but I will mention that in round 24 he did have an injury and he was subbed out in the second quarter, so that was on track to be another consistent high CBA. And then I'm not really too sure what happened in the elimination final, whatever you want to call it, the round 27 against Brisbane Lions. He just didn't spend too much time in there. Maybe they just went back to the old ways of him being this half-backer in intercepting as he does. But he had such a nice role when he was in the midfield, because when he wasn't getting points up in the midfield, he would roll back and just get constant chip, and take so many, even take kick-ins as well. So he just had this super flexible role, and if he can continue that would be absolutely awesome for us, and it'd pretty much be a give me pick for the competition, honestly, if we see that. So he is one that is highly on my list, and potentially even in my side as soon as I see something. So But even if he doesn't have this juicy role that we would like, I still think he is 5 points of value just due to those injury games. You can just see based off his adjusted score. Without those injured games, he's 5 points better than what he was. I'm not saying that's enough to pick him, but definitely something that you could consider if you're struggling for uh, a defender that you don't really see too much upside. He provides upside instantly. And even looking at his previous scores, he's always been that sort of 95 guy as a halfbacker. So at a minimum, he should be hitting that. And that means he's probably closer to 10 points of value based on that. So he is definitely one that you should be keeping an eye on. Brian Myers, I don't really want to talk about him too much, but I think I kind of have to, given that he is the fourth highest ranked forward entering in 2025. He's priced at 85.2, so that's about 874k. So he's definitely more on the expensive side, and he is coming off his season best. But he is definitely one that you want to keep on the watch list if he's going to take his game to the next level again this season. I don't see too much potential upside again, just because obviously they're already pretty good as a side, so the ball's spending plenty of time in the forward line, which means plenty of opportunity for him to score goals and be around the ball. Where he really improved in 2024 was that he just improved his tackling pressure. So he saw a pretty big bump in his average tackles. So whether that was just a bit of a coaching way just to improve that tackling pressure, but definitely just helped him take his game to the next level and become a lot more fantasy relevant for us. But in terms of starting him in the start of the season, I have no interest currently. I'd have to see something pretty significant for me to consider him, but it's definitely one to watch. If he's going to continue to be in the top six of our forwards, then we'll have to consider him at some point, and potentially that may become the mid-season buys for me at this point. So put him on your mid-season buy planning and see how you go. The next person I want to talk about is a second-year player, and that is Sean Manor. Now, this kid is, well, I won't call him a kid. What's happened here? This guy is, I think he's like 28 or something like that. He's on the older side, but he is a elite fantasy player. He knows how to rack it up. I think we all heard about it last year, and we're all really excited at what he can do. He really didn't have the best role when it came to fantasy output last season, where he was spending a lot of time just as a small forward. He did get on the end of a lot of goals, and he was able to apply a lot of pressure, which we saw that 4.5 average. So he was really elite in that sort of category. The thing I want to see in 2025 is him take some CBAs. I really think that he is the person that's going to overtake the likes of a Dangerfield. When Dangerfield sort of steps away from that midfield group, he's going to be the one that steps in as a bit of a younger player, can absolutely rack it up and can be that distributor. The only problem is he is a bit more on the expensive side, obviously priced at 73, so it's around 750k. The thing that is more interesting is that he is a forward though, so obviously forwards aren't too much of an issue this year, but I'm still finding besides the main four that we obviously all know about, trying to find that F1 and that sort of F6 is probably a bit more tricky without guaranteeing what's going to be happening. So he's definitely one that I want to see. If he's going to get some CBA role, then he is absolutely one I want to see in my side. Even just looking at his adjusted score, because he did have a couple sub games, which I will show you here if I can find his name. I'm blind, so there he is. So in round 1 and 2, he had 2 sub games, which really hurt his average. So that gives him 5 points of upside instantly. He's priced at 72 as well, so he is even a little bit lower than that. So that gives him about 7 points. But yeah, like I said, he has elite VFO numbers. He absolutely racks it up where he has 30, 40 disposals and then kicks even goals as well. So I want to see a lot more from him in 2025, and fingers crossed we get to see that. So big watch on him. This next guy is another defender that I think needs to be highly considered, as he came through in the wings for us in the back end of the last season. And he showed he had some fantasy potential, and that is Lawson Humphreys. Obviously entering his second season. He is priced at 86.8, so just over 700k there. Obviously, a bit pricey for a second-year player, but looks to be taking a distributor role at Geelong. Obviously, slots into their best 22, as I've shown here. And I think that's just what his role is going to be. He loves to chip it around a fair bit, as we saw. He knows how to absolutely rack it up. He can score 30 points within 5 minutes very, very quickly, just because he would go backwards and forwards between a player. Just doing what Geelong do, and they look for the opportunities and not try and rush the ball forward. They're not really in that ball game of trying to move quickly. They're happy to sort of chip it around a fair bit. So I think he is one that could potentially move up a fair bit. In terms of the stats, I think really the only thing that really shows that he's going to do better is he took a lot more kick-ins in the back end of the last season. So in the last 2 games, he took 4 kick-ins each, which was team high in both of those games. So round 25 and round 27. Is that going to continue? I would like to think so. With obviously, Zach Tui now retiring, that opens up a few more CBAs. They relied on him a fair bit for that. It's just such a big distribution of kick-ins, which is very Geelong-like. I even showed you the CBAs. Just look how many CBA takers there was in 2024. It was just absolutely ridiculous. Where irregular, most teams you'd think it's just going to be maybe a handful. Like I'll show you the Adelaide one. Just very clean, very consistent. You got 4 or 5 different players that have CBAs, not bloody 15. So I would like to see this a lot more concise in 2025, and that will definitely clear up a lot more in terms of being fantasy relevant. And I think we'll see a lot of people jump up in average if we do get a bit more of a cleaner distribution. It's just how they're going to manage that, and if Geelong are going to lean that way a little bit more in next year. I don't think it's going to happen just because it's working for them. It helps them with them load managing, especially with a lot of the older players. But they are starting to transition from having those older players and now bringing a lot of newer guys. So they definitely could improve. Like I said, Zach Guthrie retiring, I think that opens up a permanent spot for Humphreys here. So I think there's no risk of him being not in the best 22. And really, that's all I had to show. I think he will probably average 85. So what is that? That's probably 15 or close to 20 points of upside for him. So that could be quite juicy. So definitely one I'm on the watch list as well. Sorry, I've got a tick on my throat. Quick grab a drink. Yeah. So I love Humphreys, and I think he is definitely going to be fantasy relevant for us in the near future. Hopefully you guys can't see that. Okay. So the next person, I've got only a couple more here. And this one is a very out there pick, but I think we need to speak about him because he is so cheap on what he is able to do, and that is Cam Guthrie. Now, he has had 2 injury-riddled seasons in 2024 and 2023, where he only managed 4 games last year and 6 games the year prior, so he's just been battling injury after injury. But this guy has been a fantasy gun for us in the past. He averaged 105 in 2021 and even 95 in 2022, so he knows how to be very, very good with the ball, and that potentially leads him to be 25 points of value right there, based on that he's priced at 71 and about 731k. So it is obviously a huge risk. Obviously having that huge discount of 18% on his 86.8% average in 2023. I really just want to see a smooth preseason from him without injury. Obviously, we get to see an opening round from him, so we get to see what his role is. Because that's the biggest the biggest concern for me is, have they moved past him as being part of that midfield group where we saw him be, a 65% or a 50% sort of CBA taker? Is he going to be part of that main group? Potentially not. You're talking like your Dangerfield, your Atkins, your Smith. Is Atkins going to be there anymore? You got Bruin that also swings in there. They have so many guys that just go through there, even the blitzers and whatnot. So I'm not sure where they fit in a 32, 33-year-old Cam Guthrie who is consistently injured, and obviously that risk of being injured and being rested from the Geelong Cats side of things that's obviously a huge risk as well. So would take a lot for me to pick him, especially with a few other injury picks that are potentially already in my team. So you don't want to be having too many of these injury risk guys, because no matter what, you're probably going to run into one of them, and one of them's going to fall over and hurt your season. So you got to be careful when you're picking these sort of guys. But I think he's so much value that he has to be spoken about, because if he's lighting the world up in preseason and looks fit and healthy, he could be the Elliot Yo of last season for us and absolutely do us wonders. So keep an eye on him. The next person, I won't touch too much on him, but he is obviously the most owned player so far in the fantasy game. He is around 70% owned, and that is Bailey Smith after being traded from the Western Bulldogs. Now, I've already spoken about him a little bit in other videos, but we all know what he's capable of. I think he's a minimum of 30 points under value as it stands. I think he's going to have quite a big CBA role at Geelong. Obviously, being a mid forward helps him as well. What else can I really say? He is just one of the easiest locks that you'll get this season. I probably don't expect him to get into the triple figures like a lot of other people think. I think that the way that Geelong, sort of the way they run their mids and the way that they distribute the load across all their players, I think he will get closer to the 90 range or push into the 90, 95 areas. I just don't see the capacity of going 100. I don't think they rely on that sort of player too much. So while he is value and he's an easier lock in the side, I don't think he's going to be to the heights that we are hoping. Either way, I think he's going to be in that top 6 forward easily at a 90 average, if not 95, pushes him closer to the top. So easily lock him in your side. I really don't need to convince you too much on this player. I think everyone already has him inside. And to finish it off, the last player I wanted to talk about, who is extremely cheap and is a delisted free agent, and that is Jack Martin. He is priced down at 42.7 after only playing 3 games in 2024 for Carlton. Just sort of ran out of flavour for them. He was sort of a star for them for a little while, and just really couldn't get back on the park. Just for, I don't know, I think they preferred other people. So, but he's got a 21% 21% discount on his 54 average from 2023. Sorry, I can't get rid of this tickle. He's shown some capacity to be fantasy relevant in the past. Obviously, looking back at many years ago now, he's averaged in the 80s previously. Obviously, he is a small forward. Doesn't have a super CBA role, and I don't think he will be. My only concern with him at Geelong is, where does he slot in? When we're looking at this team, he's obviously on the emergency list on this particular list, but they're already running 4 small forwards in Brian Wise, Brett Close, Tyson Stengel, and then you got Sean Manor on the bench there as well. Like I said, does Sean Manor start to push into the midfield and that open up a spot for the likes of Jack Martin? Doesn't Atkins still get a game if they've got other midfielders in there? There's so many different potentials with the likes of this team where people are starting to shift and move. So I definitely could see him be in the side at some point in the season and provide us with a potential some value. Because, like I said, priced at 42, just over 400k, he could easily become a weapon and easily average probably 60 if he's given the right role. So keep an eye on him. I think he could definitely be a replacement for the likes of Elijah Hewitt, who I haven't spoken about yet, but is mostly in everyone's teams as the F6. He's a little bit more pricey than that, but if he's going to get consistent games, then he's definitely a potential option for us in that sort of slot to provide us some value. Besides that, I think that'll sort of do it. Hopefully this one's been a bit of a longer one, but yeah, that's the Geelong Cats done and done, and I'll catch you guys in the next episode. Enjoy. Bye.